Since when am I Faust? Chapter 6. Through the Cavern. I clenched my teeth as Cadence pulled another shard from my back. The princess had been at this for a while now, and it had easily been over an hour since she started. A small pile of crystals laid beside her, showing her progress, and they shimmered in the dim light of her horn. Cadence tossed the crystal to the side and leant closer, as she checked to see how many were left. Nodding to herself, the pink mare lifted her head and sighed.
Okay, Lauren, there's 2 more, but these ones are a little larger. You might want to prepare yourself. Okay.
I whispered, and I tensed up. The shard Cadence was looking at was in my wing, and as she bit down on it, I felt myself clench my teeth in pain. I tried my best to keep my cries to a minimum, but the sudden jolt of her pulling the crystal back through my wing was painful enough to make my knees buckle.
Stop!
I yelled, and I collapsed to the ground. My body was shaking, my ears were ringing, and my heart was racing. Gritting my teeth, I shut my eyes and prepared for the next one. Cadence spat the shard out and looked at me.
Alright, last one.
She leaned forward to grab it, but as she got a closer look, the Alicorn paused. The princess proceeded to tilt her head to the side as she looked at my leg curiously. She was trying to find the best way to pull it out, and her concern was causing her to hesitate. It was only a momentary pause, but for me, it felt like an eternity. The anxiety and the anticipation of waiting for her to grab the next one was like torture, and I desperately wanted it to be over. Scrunching up my muzzle, I pleaded.
Please, just get it over with already!
The pink mare sighed, and decided to oblige my pleas for mercy. Steadying herself, Cadence grabbed the last shard with her teeth and started counting down.
Alright, 3, 2, 1.
With a sudden jolt, she pulled it out. The sickening sound of it leaving my flesh was enough to make my stomach churn, and I covered my mouth as I screamed. The pain shot through me once again, and I couldn't help but hammer the ground with my foreleg as I waited for it to subside. When it began to ease up, I found myself to be breathing heavily, and my coat was damp with blood, sweat, and tears. I felt absolutely gross. Looking up from the ground, I turned to look at Cadence with a weak smile, and said,
Thank you.
My voice was quivering, and my whole body was shaking, but I was glad that my torment was over. It was a brief moment of relief, but as I looked up at the cave system, I knew that this was only just the beginning of my day. Taking a deep breath, I tried to stand, but my legs quickly gave out, and I fell onto my stomach. Cadence rushed over to my side in a hurry, and she helped me off the ground. A faint smile made its way onto my face, and I thanked her as I draped a wing over her back. As she helped me up, I looked at the princess and said,
Come on, let's get out of here.
Cadence nodded in agreement, and the 2 of us began walking, or limping in my case. We weren't sure where we were going, but we decided to head towards a section of the cave that opened up to a large cavern. Along the way, we came across a pile of rubble blocking the path. There was no way around it, so the 2 of us had no other choice but to climb over it. Giving it my best shot, I began climbing. Unfortunately, though, my hoof slipped when I was partway up the slope and my wing slipped off Cadence's back. Sliding down a short ways away, I let out a groan as I winced in pain. The princess quickly came over to my side and she helped me up. Not wanting to fall off again, the 2 of us locked wings over each other's backs and we held on tight as we made it up the rubble. Although we were working together, I was still struggling to climb, and I was panting by the time we made it to the other side. Cadence gave me a concerned glance, as she then asked me,
Are you alright, Lauren? Yeah, I'll be fine.
I gasped. Cadence's look of concern remained, but then she decided to listen to me, and the 2 of us continued moving. With her help, I limped my way about 10 feet from the pile of rocks, and then we heard an odd sound. It wasn't too far away from where we had just been, and from beyond the rubble, just out of view, we saw the cave become illuminated with an emerald glow. At seeing the green light, I felt the hairs on my neck stiffen, and I began to feel nervous. I had recovered some magic while I passed out, but it wasn't enough to protect Cadence or myself. We were practically helpless. The 2 of us looked in the direction of the flickering light with tired eyes, and we awaited whatever the green glow would reveal. The light stayed there a moment longer, and then it died down. When it was gone, our sight was enveloped in darkness, and they had to readjust again. We stared forward with wide eyes as we tried to see, but it was just blackness. Then, out of the darkness, a dim purple light appeared, and a young female voice called out.
Hello? Is anyone there?
We could tell that she was afraid and unsure of where she was. I felt myself sigh in relief, and my heart went out to whoever was trapped with us. However, I was glad that Cadence had not come back to finish what she started. As for who was down here with us, I was fairly confident that I knew who it was, but I was reluctant to trust that it wasn't a trap to lure us in. Cadence looked at me and her face said it all. She was nervous, and her eyes were asking me if she should respond. I hesitated and weighed our options. After thinking about it for a moment, I gave her a weak smile and nodded. I held her tighter as the 2 of us turned towards the pony, and Cadence called out,
Over here!
We heard our new guest walk across the stone floor, and we listened as she climbed over the rubble. Our eyes had been slowly readjusting to the darkness, but the dim purple light rising from the other side of the stones helped us see. We saw her walk into the light, and Cadence tilted her head in confusion as she recognized the mare before her.
Twilight?
Twilight's eyes widened, and the purple unicorn instantly leaned down and got into an attack position. The light from Twilight's horn brightened, and it was accompanied by a charging sound. My eyes widened as I realized what was going on, and I turned to Cadence in a hurry.
Get down!
I shouted, and I pushed her to the ground. The two of us fell, and we narrowly avoided the beam of magic from the purple unicorn. I hit the ground with a thump, and my body slipped on a wet stone and fell into a crevice. I became hidden in the shadows, and I grit my teeth as my wounds reminded me of their presence. Weakly, I leaned up from the ground and looked at Twilight, only to see her charging up another spell.
Stop!
I cried out. My voice was weaker than usual, but with the effort that I put into it, I reached Twilight over the sound of her charging magic. She turned her head and looked in my direction, and she seemed to notice me for the first time. Glad that I got her attention, I took the opportunity to quickly explain.
The one who sent you down here was an imposter. This is the real Cadence.
Twilight raised an eyebrow at my explanation, and she glanced at Cadence with a narrowed gaze. Frowning, she demanded of the pink pony to
Prove it!
And Cadence looked at me with an uncertain expression. Putting a hoof to her chest, the princess breathed out to calm herself, and she straightened up and stood tall. The pink mare walked forward, and Twilight began to back up as the princess advanced. The unicorn flared her horn, ready to strike if Cadence tried anything, but a weak smile from the pink pony slowed her retreat. A bit skeptical, Twilight tilted her head to the side, and she watched as the mare in front of her suddenly started dancing.
Sunshine, sunshine, ladybug's awake.
She reached out.
Clap your hooves and do a little shake.
As she looked down at her hoof, she then looked back up at Cadence and smiled. Leaping forward, she embraced the alicorn with a warm hug.
You remember me!
Cadence smiled.
Of course. How could I forget the filly I love to sit for the most?
The two enjoyed the hug for a moment longer before they separated and smiled at each other. My wincing as I leaned forward pulled the two out of their stupor, and Cadence ran over to my side to help me up. Putting my wing over her side, I leaned on the pink mare. The pain was manageable now, but I was still limping as I walked. Even so, I hobbled as fast as I could. When Twilight saw me walk out of the shadows with Cadence, her eyes shrunk at seeing my injuries.
Oh my goodness, what happened?
She asked, and she quickly ran to support my other side. Glancing down at her, I noticed how the purple unicorn was a little shorter than me, and with a labored shrug, I said,
I got on the imposter's bad side.
The unicorn's eyebrows raised.
Oh wow, I am so sorry to hear that.
Twilight glanced down for a moment, and I gave a shallow smile at her genuine concern. Lifting my wing, I let it drape over her back, and as I did, the unicorn glanced at the appendage. Then her brow furrowed, and she looked up at my horn. Twilight's eyes seemed to light up, and her head spun around again. She looked at my wing, and then back at my horn. And she continued to do this several times over as her mouth bobbed open like a fish.
What? But who? How?
Twilight stammered as she tried to pull the pieces together. Her eyes were wide open, and she stared at me with shock as she finally managed to say,
Who the heck are you?
I found her adorable behavior comical, and I could see out of the corner of my eye that Cadence was smiling to herself as well. I looked at the unicorn and grinned.
Name's Lauren. I'm Celestine Luna's mother. It's nice to meet you, Twilight.
From my other side, I could hear Cadence quietly counting as she looked in the other direction.
And 3, 2, 1...
Suddenly, the unicorn stopped in her tracks, and her head shot up to stare at me. To be honest, I almost fell over because of her sudden stop, but I managed to hold on to Cadence with my wing. She saved me from falling, and we continued walking as the unicorn stared off into space. The two of us got a short distance away before we heard Twilight's mind reboot, and she shouted,
You're Celestia's mom!
The mare was almost in full freakout mode as she ran up to my side. Cadence leaned forward to get a look at the unicorn.
Twilight, you need to calm down.
To which she responded,
How can I? She's Celestia's mother! I have so many questions!
She was running in place, giddy at the idea of asking about Tia as a filly. She bounced around a little as she squeed, and then hopped in front of me with a grin that was on her face. It stayed there for a moment, but then it faltered as a stray thought crossed her mind. Tilting her head to the side, the unicorn raised an eyebrow and asked,
Wait, why have I never heard of you?
At this point, I would have expected Lauren to take over and answer her, but to my surprise, Cadence spoke up in our stead. She leaned forward to see the mare and said,
Do you remember the time that we went to the memorial fountain in the middle of Canterlot?
The unicorn's eyebrow raised at the alicorn's question.
Yes, but what is that? Oh...
Her eyes widened again as she turned back to me and stared. Cadence smiled, seeing that the unicorn remembered that day. She then continued her explanation, saying,
That statue, the one in the center of the fountain, was made in her honor. The mare who saved equals from the darkness and led us to a better generation. Lauren, Faust.
It's crazy how they're talking about this even though a whole war is going on. But then again, sometimes you just need a little break, even when so many people are in danger. Anywho, let's get on to our heartwarming donators. Top donators: TacoCat598, Peter Coulthard, J Tinman, Darkside, Gauntlet, and Only One Thing, Zar630, Strix, Raiden, Narwhals, Black Moonheart, Drake Lovedragon, Pastel Skies, Austin Roland, CrazyColor557, Stu Hex, Will, Dospo, Delta Omega, Jack Hadge, RuneScythe9852, Leslie Prickett, Hunter Norman, Stephen Bingham, LineGod12, Jason Alvarado, Discord and Defender, and many more amazing people. Thank you all so much for watching this video and live life to the fullest.